The future of U.S. agriculture isn't just a farm story, it's a food story that shows up on our plate every day. This week on Rooted and Restless, we are moving from the plate back to the farm and find out about the story behind some of the headlines we've recently seen about U.S. agriculture and its crisis. And who better to talk about it than my guest today, David Parker, with an Indiana farm background and a Purdue ag economics degree. David has influenced and impacted U.S. agriculture for decades through his public speaking, his strategic consulting, and ag retail insights. And fortunately, our paths crossed a few years ago when I joined the board of advisors for Curious Plot, an ag and food marketing agency based in Minneapolis. But today, our thoughts are our own and not any particular associated with any of the organizations with which we work. So, David, before we get into the real heavy issues on headlines, I just have to ask you, how did an Indiana farm kid get to Las Vegas? The last time I was there, I didn't see any corn or soybean fields.
No, you won't see any corn or soybeans here in Las Vegas. And I get asked that question, frankly, about 15 times a week, it seems like. But we've been here, speaking of 15, it'll be 15 years in May. The main reason is our son lives in California, and we wanted to be closer to him. And we always lived in the Midwest, as you said, grew up in Indiana, started the business in Indianapolis, was there for most of my professional career, and then moved here to Las Vegas so that we could be closer to him. We also love it here, frankly. It's a wonderful place to live. Contrary to popular belief, we all do not live on the Strip. It's actually a town. It's actually a city. And I say this, we actually have churches and everything. I mean, it always surprises people because all they know is the Strip. But it's actually a wonderful place to live. My wife has been retired for many, many years, and it's a great place, especially for folks our age. Lots to do, great weather. We like to golf, and so that's pretty much available every day. So it's been a great move, and it's been wonderful. And also we appreciate paying no state income tax. That's also a nice benefit of Las Vegas.
Well, I actually think you could probably be a good advocate and work for the Chamber of Commerce, frankly, with that type of overview. But and I would agree. Having been in Las Vegas, there is definitely more than what people think about than the Strip. So when we talk about Strip, let's talk about newspaper and the news headlines that we've recently seen in regards to the status of the U.S. agriculture. It's been called that U.S. ag is in a crisis. And we know that one of the letters that recently came out definitely came out from a large group of farm leaders, bipartisan, across the commodities and various entities. And some I know, and you probably know even more. So tell me what, from your perspective, what are the issues behind what we've seen in the headlines?
Sure, and this will take a while, so there may be many additional questions as we talk about this issue. And it is critical. I do think one thing we just got to own up to is, though, the word crisis is pretty much opinion oriented, right? I mean, it's not necessarily based in always hard fact. It really depends on who you're asking, who you're listening to with regard to crisis. Is it indeed right now? In very difficult times, it is, especially in the commodity row crop area. There's no question about that. The traditional breadbasket, as we think about it, the corn, soybeans, and wheat part of our industry, is feeling a crisis. And if I had to sum it up, it's really one word, and that is price, price, price. And by that I mean the price of commodities. It is, they're not certainly at a good factor. They are below break even for most farms that are doing things traditionally, and especially if they do not own their land. And I'll probably come back to that a couple of times as we go. But right now, production cost and compared to the actual cost for the commodity, especially at harvest, they're below break even on a normal yield year. So that will obviously cause folks to indeed suggest that there's a crisis. And I wouldn't disagree with that. So, the other things that have impacted it tremendously, folks are very curious, like all industry, about, what's going to be the role of AI. And we may talk about that more as we go. But really, one of the biggest single factors is the issue for us of trade in the export market. And it's been impacted by a lot of things, but a couple of very, very major ones. And this is not a political statement, it's just a fact. The tariffs are not good for commodity agriculture. They're just not. And the reason is because ag has been one of the things over time that we've been a net exporter of. Well, it's one of the easiest things for countries that we place severe tariffs on to retaliate with. They can hold back, So yes, China can agree to buy 12 million metric tons of soybeans, but that doesn't mean that they have to take them. And that they kind of is used as a lever, if you will. So that is certainly, a big piece of it. The other thing that's happened though, and this is tough for U.S. agriculturists, from the farm gate to manufacturers and everybody in between to get their head around. Frankly, South America, and specifically Brazil, has proven to the world's biggest buyer, China, that they can take care of their needs. It's that simple. It really started big time during COVID. And of course, the first administration of this current administration with tariffs. And frankly, Brazil kind of basically said, and I'm being very just common here as I say this, but hey, don't worry about it. We can take care of you. We'll get you all you need, and they can. Which is why China has been investing billions of dollars in South America and specifically Brazil, and it's all about infrastructure so that they can get product from the field to mainland China in a much quicker fashion. That was always the holdback. It wasn't that they couldn't produce, it was that they couldn't get them product. And now they continue to improve that. Are they as good at logistics as we are? Not even close. But are they getting closer? Every day. So those two big factors, the impact of the tariffs, no question about it, and therefore, again, creating levers that are usable by other countries and specifically China. And then the other one, and maybe even a bigger issue is that China or Brazil and the rest of South America proving to China, we can get you all of the agriculture commodity products you need. So you think you're saying, if you're listening to this, David, well, yeah, we're just talking about corn, soybeans, and wheat, but it drives everything. It drives investment for all the manufacturing companies, whether they be equipment or crop protection companies or seed businesses, are driven because of the amount of acres. Roughly 90 million acres of each, corn and soybeans, each year planted in the U.S. And so as they go, and if they don't go in the right direction, you cannot make up the shortfall on specialty crops, on vegetables or permanent tree crops or something like that. Those are still incredibly viable, but they won't make up how that feels from a revenue perspective to major companies, and then it trickles through the entire value chain. So that's about as quick of explanation as I can give as to why the word crisis is being used. But it's true. Now, here's one other piece, and I know, Marianne, I respect you so much and all your knowledge around the food space. The one that constantly keeps getting talked about is the price of beef. Well, the interesting thing is beef is the one thing that it is absolutely not a crisis. The beef guys are doing incredibly well. However, there is an outcome to that due to them doing so well economically, and that is we're not building back the cow herd because that heifer she is worth more as beef than she is to get her pregnant and gestate a calf and then have that calf go to market. That's a year and a half or so that I am missing out on significant revenue. And so guys are actually, if anything, they've shrunk, and most of them have their actual, mama cow herd, if you will. There's an ag boy for you, right? So that because they're selling those female animals, they're selling them as beef. So that's a big deal. And frankly, there is nothing on the short term horizon that's going to cause that to come back. And they, by the way, are glad that corn price is down because it's their main source of feed. So that's about as quick as I can go, Marianne.
Well, I think you've given us a great landscape, and you answered my question about Brazil before I even had to ask that. And I do think you explained it very well because, if you're not in this space, the average individual is not thinking about the impact of South America, or again, we want to think, well, let's just go local. But I think, and Jenny Schmidt in the second episode that I did really talked about the economics, and it really is economics. And one quick question before I move on is that you definitely described the beef situation as it relates to the food on the plate. And I think with consumers a lot of times and other, when we see the headlines that we just talked about, is that does it really affect me as a consumer on the plate? Beef does, exactly, but especially some of the crops.
Well, I mean, again, a couple things about affecting on the plate. And I think the one thing we forget about U.S. agriculture is we still have, and I'm counting everything, there's nearly 900 million acres in total in production in the U.S. Now, that includes, for those listening that aren't familiar, that includes everything, right? So that's orchards, permanent tree crops, things like walnuts, things like grapes, annual vegetables, all those kind of things. But all in, it's about 900 million, maybe a little less now. And again, we might talk about later some of that acreage going away on an annual basis. But because of that and because of its impact, food really does do something for all consumers and frankly, all Americans. And that is we still do indeed have the most abundant and most secure food supply in the world. All right. And so because of that, overall, still our spend on food is dramatically lower than other places around the world. That number continues to move, but it's somewhere at best at 10% of disposable income being spent on food, which, again, as high as food prices are, if people would really look at it, though, that is a big deal. And so all of agriculture enables that. There's no question. Certainly, if we could get local, that's fantastic. There's no question about it. But all those corn and soybeans that people see as they drive by on the interstate through the middle of the country, that product is being used to feed animals and or create things like starch, as an example, that go into all kinds of food, right? That you buy on the shelf and lots of other products as well. Sugar, right, certainly is involved there in many of the things that people buy. So it's not just for animal feed, but that is the basis for that. Now, there is one other component, and I'm assuming you're going to ask me about it, and so we can talk about it as your perspective and your prerogative, but we really do need to get, well, the first phase would be to get E15 passed here in the U.S. Because again, that ethanol is made from corn. And again, it's about security, right? It's about energy security. It's also about continuing to keep our agriculture base, which again forms the basis of a lot of our economy all throughout the U.S. So, we are really looking at not only E15, which is ethanol, but also, refinable or the aviation fuel issue, which again, that would be corn, and then biofuels, which would be soybeans. And so I'm hopeful that we continue to explore and develop that, make it economical. But I think that's a future, an absolute for U.S. agriculture.
And I think you brought up a really good question. Probably we need to even think about that as another episode, because as you well know, I think a lot of times, even though from an agriculture standpoint we recognize the economics is not only from food, but looking at all the aspects that you mentioned, from fuel, not only for fuel for food, but fuel for to actually run from planes to cars. And that doesn't always set well necessarily with consumers. And like, why are you spending precious land to grow food that doesn't feed us?
Yeah, well, but again, that all that food that they see out there in a commodity, but be it corn and soybeans, that doesn't feed them directly anyway. That feeds them through those other sources, as I said, and that's the part that they don't understand. And I don't blame them. Hey, it looks like corn in my garden. What the heck, I mean, that's the corn I eat, and it's not, and that's always been misunderstood. Probably, unfortunately, no matter how hard you and I try, Marianne, it will probably always be misunderstood. But the food for fuel issue, fuel versus food debate, is legitimate. But I think again, they're the underlying factors. It's an addition. It's not a replacement. It's an addition to how we might utilize what we're really good at. We are amazing at production, and we really are. And we're also incredibly amazing at logistics. We can move literally millions and millions and millions of bushels in a very, very quick fashion, which gives us an advantage globally. But we gotta keep refining that system as we go forward.
Well, and I think when we talk about, the whole concept around this podcast is talking about the story behind food, and that it's not as simple as one thinks. And I think what we've just talked about shows the complexity in that regard. Let's hit on a little bit. You mentioned land and how much land is being used, but we also see that every day how many acres of farmland is going to development, and I've experienced that personally in some of the family farms. But also we kind of see the battle now in some areas over solar farms. And so the question is, do we really need to be concerned about the depletion of farmland? Or looking down the future, what are some alternatives? Do we necessarily need land? What are some other alternatives when we think about growing food?
And so how long do we have?
Oh, well, about 2 or 3 minutes, okay?
Okay, the land use debate. We are indeed losing acres every year. There's no question about it. However, one thing that doesn't ever get talked about in that same discussion is, and yet we made more product. Our productivity per acre continues to go up on an annual basis, and that never gets discussed. So I just maybe set that myth aside that every acre we lose, it's we're losing production. That is not true. It's actually gone the other way. We actually make more total tons, bushels, however you want to describe it, pounds. It doesn't matter to me. Every year, right? Even though we have less acres in production. So I want to get that out there first. All right. With regard to the debate around energy, okay, so do we need alternative sources of energy in addition to what we have traditionally used? The answer is absolutely we do. No matter, and I'm take the data center debate out of it. We just need to we continue to consume more energy to do the things that we do. People don't want data centers, and yet they want to ask their phone for an immediate answer, and don't understand that that's going to take some power and some water somewhere. So that's another comment that I would make. The interesting thing is, though, and I'm sure you have producers that are watching and listening to your podcast, I am about to upset about 2/3 of them. So here we go. The people that always complain the most about wind farms and solar farms are other farmers whose ground that's not on.
That's a good point.
No one ever wants to talk about it. What they are really nervous about is The guy that just leased his 900 acres to the energy company is going to take that money and go rent more farm ground in their trade area, and they won't be able to compete with him. That's what this debate gets to be about. Oh, we'll talk about traffic. We'll talk about loss of, good old farm ground. We'll have people crying on film, and that's been in the family for, or our farm's been in the family for 100 years. Well, guess what? The one that just leased to the wind company, it's been in 100 years as well. That guy was just able to now get, $1,100 a windmill a year for 30 years. So, I mean, again, here's the debate. Do we want to live in a society, in a free market economy, where we actually say someone that owns an asset that they can't sell it or rent it if that opportunity arises? Because that's really the debate that we should be having. I don't think anybody really wants that, but that's kind of what it's come down to. But again, I'm just going to make this comment very emphatically, because I have been behind the scenes on 2 or 3 of these big projects that didn't happen. It was farmers, surrounding farmers, who put up the biggest pushback. And again, the fear was the guy will take the money and go rent more farm ground.
Well, I think you provide a very interesting perspective, because sometimes, we forget who might really be out there either for or against. Now, let's hear from Mindy Herman, registered dietitian, food and nutrition writer, and a guru on all the latest food trends.
Hi, Marianne. Here are a few takeaways from Curious Plot's latest Consumer Curiosity Report. Consumers they surveyed are very curious about new food experiences, especially in cooking, restaurants, health foods and drinks, and food festivals. They're particularly interested in easy meals, especially ones that can be made in 30 minutes or less. They want new cooking skills to help them learn ways, especially to cook fruits and vegetables. And with today's financial insecurities and uncertainties, consumers also need guidance on eating on a budget. Already they are shopping more for store brands and cutting back on premium products. Many millennials and Gen Z respondents also say that they stopped buying fresh produce because of high prices. And in a stressful world, consumers are especially interested in foods and beverages for better sleep. And that's this week's Trends Minute.
Now, let's return to our conversation. You mentioned wind farms. I know driving to Colorado across Kansas, and once you're in Kansas for like a day on I-70.
It looks the same the whole way.
But we have seen the continue growth of windmills, along the way, and the wind farms. But guess what? You can still do cattle as well. So, it's kind of a combination in that regard.
You can, and I make this point. That's something, we've never done, because again, we're a free market society. And I do a lot of work in Kansas. There are acres in Kansas that have been put into production that should never have been. They don't have the soil quality or the water. Right. Can they grow a crop? Yeah. Can they grow a good crop year after year? No. But what a perfect place for a wind farm. But I don't believe I want to be a part of an economy that says to a guy, because he lives in Kansas, if he wants to try to produce corn, he ought to be able to do that, right? It's no different than having a company and saying, this is the product that we want to sell. It's up to the market if they buy it or not, right? So, right. This is a really big issue. If we had a national farm policy, there are a lot of places in our country that, frankly, should never have been put in production, ever. And it's just reality. But again, who are we to say? And that's the issue that we have. Kansas, you and I have been there a lot. It's the perfect place for a windmill.
Exactly. And you've got to have the wind, and they got it.
They've got it every day.
Exactly.
Every day. So anyway.
Well, great perspective. So let's, as we move toward the end of our time, let's talk about and you've mentioned wind farms, solar, technology. We both growing up on farms, kind of different types of farms. We definitely have seen the evolution of technology, but thinking about the trends, I talked about food trends when we just started this podcast, but obviously there's a lot of agriculture trends, which you just inferred. But thinking about the trends in the future of agriculture, what's the future of agriculture going to look like in 2030?
Well, and it continues. I mean, one thing I will start with, there's going to continue to be more consolidation. There's no question about that at the farm gate. Part of that is due to the current economic situation. There are a lot of folks that, we hit a lull there 7-8 years ago, went down, then we came back up. But there are a lot of folks that the first digit in their birth date is a 7. Nothing wrong with being in your 70s, but they're not going to put their equity at risk again. A lot of those folks do not have any successor in their own operations. So those acres are going to continue to be consolidated. And again, we can debate good or bad, but that's been going on forever. It's just at a more accelerated pace now. We're down to really not all that many farmers truly moving the needle with regard to production in North America, both in crop and livestock. So this is not a phenomenon that's going to do anything but frankly continue, and I'm hearing people suggest continue to accelerate as people start having to dip into that equity again. They're just not, a lot of them aren't going to do it. So that's one big issue there as you think about that. With regard to technology, AI is the one that everybody is excited about and scared of at the same time. I will tell you, it will be out of the gate and is already, be somewhat misused. People forget right now what AI is designed to do, no matter which one of the tools you use, is designed to give you an answer. And it will, because it goes out to the information world and finds information and gives you back an answer. The question is, first of all, did you ask it the right question? And secondly, did you verify? So that's going to be the need for AI here, at least in the near term future. The trend that folks are most looking forward to, especially in retail and especially in the grain business, is autonomous trucking. And that's because we truly do not have enough truckers. And that is reality. So there are companies right now today actually running trucks on the road. You have probably passed them or they've passed you that are driverless. Or at least the tandem is driverless. I know one company right now that the front truck has a driver, and that person's role, frankly, is to monitor systems. The rear truck, and these are semis, has no driver and follows at the exact same pace and space the entire trip. So it's kind of fascinating what's already being done. But people are excited about that one. The other technology that is big is anything around precision. And where I see it, that is really continued to evolve is precision irrigation. Really making sure that we're doing everything we can do to get that water droplet as close as we possibly can to where it'll have the most effect. And there's still a long way to go in that. But it's getting better literally daily as we think about that. There aren't a lot of new products coming in from an innovation perspective in the crop protection pipeline. There are repackaging, maybe some additional components being added to existing products. But as far as a brand new AI, there are not a lot of those. So and part of that is also because of economics, right? It costs about $400 million to bring a product to market. And, you got to make sure it's a good one before you're willing to commit that, especially when your profits, as they are for all the crop protection companies, are down. So that's kind of the other side of that. And then on equipment, again, we'll go back to precision. Deer See and Spray is probably the best example of that, literally being able to identify with the camera on the boom of the sprayer only a weed that needs to get sprayed, rather than how we would have normally done it would have been to broadcast product across the entire field, which is tremendous for the environment, but also just, great from an economic savings perspective as well.
Well, I think you've identified so many things that we could just talk hours and hours on in that regard. But the key is that where technology has definitely benefited, and it benefits all of us that eat, food on the table, and any concerns about the use of pesticides, and then water. I think you've addressed where the technology is going. Is that everybody wants to use less, and so because it saves and it makes for a better food supply. So
and safer food supply.
Exactly. So I think with that image, is there any image that you would like to dispel that you think consumers kind of think a farmer is? I know I have my opinions, but I'll reserve it. I'll yield to yours.
I know folks want to believe and romanticize about the American Gothic picture. The couple, in bib overalls in front of the clapboard house, hold the pitchfork. Absolutely unfair to today's farmer and absolutely untrue. Now, here's the reality. Are there still those people in every rural ag market? Yes, there are. And here's a comment that I'll make. If you own your land and don't necessarily have the need for huge profits because you don't want to expand, you can farm forever. And you may well look like that picture. But the farmer of the future who's already here is an absolute business person. There's no question about it. Full-time, most of them actually have full-time accounting professionals that are on their team, not their outside CPA, but their own accountant internally. They have to manage land. They have to manage resources. They, more than anything, have to manage people, and they have to manage compliance. Literally, we have to start thinking of the future of the farm as it's a factory. Its output, instead of a car or a widget, is food. And those that are doing that they're gonna continue to be successful. They constantly are looking for ways to do a couple things: add value and find other needs that they can meet with any kind of specification, any kind of specialty to what might have traditionally been a commodity. And the guys that are going to make it and are making it are going to do just that. I have the pleasure every year of being on the faculty at TPAP, the Executive Program for Agricultural Professionals. And I assure you, the people that are in that room, you wouldn't know what they do. They could be running any kind of business anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, which is where they're from. They just happen to be running a farm.
Well, and I think the key here is that it's still about it is a business. It has to be, to make it work, and the economy of scale. Sometimes we think small is good, but we have to have small's fine if you had it. But to your point, we have to have the large economy, and at the end of the day, it's still a people business, and it's a family. It's a family farm. I think, even though I think you alluded to that, is that we will see a consolidation, but guess what? It's still run by families.
Well, yeah, that's absolutely. Just a little over 1% is truly corporate farms here in the U.S. They are always family. They're just big.
Right.
And that's a whole different issue. It really truly is. So, and again, people kind of get this whole American Gothic thing kind of mixed up with today's farmer. I mean, they're still going to be local people. They're still going to live in their local area. They're still going to go to church, and their kids are going to go to school, or their grandkids. It's a business. It's just a different entity going forward than it was when everybody looked alike, right? I mean, that's
right.
exactly what's going on. And then you talked about efficiency. There's not a single industry anywhere in the world that doesn't do this exact same thing. Continue to expand, because again, I've got these assets. They're very expensive. How do I make sure that I'm getting the most out of them? Spread it over more business. That's no different than why, a guy with a combine, what's he need to do to make that a better decision? Have more acres.
Well, I think you've given us a great look into the headlines of where we've talked about and the realities. It's still about, the future of U.S. farms does affect what's on our plates in that regard. But before we leave, it's February. And you know my other love is obviously college basketball. And you and I do not, the good thing is neither of us wear red. So that's a good thing, you know. But, you know, it's February, March Madness is around the corner. You know, I didn't call you, but at the beginning of the season, when Kentucky beat Purdue in the exhibition game, I was psyched. I thought we would have the 9th banner hanging from in Lexington somewhere around April the 6th, and was hoping that maybe this was just a preview of what the final game was going to look like. You know, I'm not so sure that's going to happen from our end at this point. So Purdue looks pretty good. So, you know, in your crystal ball, do you think we'll meet again in March somewhere? Whether or not we get to Indianapolis is a big question.
Well, you know, I might go to Indianapolis because that's just, the farm is only 30 miles from there. So I might be in Indy, but it won't be because I'll be watching the Boilers in the Final Four, I predict. If we meet again, I'm unfortunately going to tell you, I think it's probably Sweet 16 is where that meeting would happen. I don't see the way we're playing to go much past Elite Eight. But as you know, this year, there are easily 10 to 12 teams that could be the one. And in fact, you probably paid attention. Arizona, the currently number one, got beat last night. So it's really up in the air. But I look at my team and yours, frankly, I'm kind of seeing Sweet 16, maybe Elite Eight for both of them. Beyond that, I really it would be a really nice surprise. That's my guess.
And there's been surprises. I can remember those, but you're absolutely right. One never knows. But, you know, I had to add that because after all, you know, as I used to tell when I led groups for dietitians, I'd always say, if you weren't a dietitian, what would you want to be? And I would tell people I really wanted to be an ESPN sports announcer. So, you know, the fact is there's something about with farming, you know, basketball goes along with that. So definitely looked at that. Well, David, thank you so much for your time today. You gave us excellent insight, as you always do. I think it definitely says that the story around farming is complex, but at the end of the day, it still comes down to a family farm, a farmer looking at how to produce food in a way that benefits us, but also it puts food on their table as well. So thank you again for your time. It was great chatting with you.
Absolutely my pleasure. Have a great day.
Thank you. As I reflect on our conversation with David today, I think the key here is to realize is that agriculture and farming is a combination of small and large. But we need to think about that just because a farm is large, it's not, quote, a factory. It is a business that benefits not only that farmer, which is a family farmer, but the economy, the community around them, around us, and the cost of food on the table. So when we talk about there's always a story behind food, but it's not as simple as it thinks. I think today's comment definitely says it's complicated. It's not as simple as you think, but the good news, let's celebrate that we've found technology and we have found ways to make sure that we have a safe food supply, available food supply. We just need to make sure that it's accessible for everyone. Thank you for listening, Rooted and Restless. It's all about digging deeper into the behind the scenes about food, agriculture, and nutrition, because after all, every food has a story, and sometimes it's not as simple as it seems. Subscribe to Rooted and Restless wherever you listen to podcasts or find us on YouTube.